People who have taken an Ancestry DNA test and accidentally uncovered a family secret. What was it? My bio dad left his family and 2 daughters in Washington and married my mom in Los Angeles 5 weeks later. I found his first marriage certificate but nothing about a divorce. I'm pretty sure he was a bigamist. I found out that my dad is not my biological father. Turns out the family friend I grew up calling grandpa is. Oh yay. And he was also my mom's bariatric surgeon. Felt weird, man. Dang. He was supposed to make her belly smaller. Made it bigger instead. I have an uncle that was put up for adoption. He contacted my grandma and she thought he was going to extort her. They're well off. Turns out he's a multi-millionaire on his own. They still have limited contact, though my dad has reached out and formed a relationship. Apparently they look exactly alike and have the same personality, which sounds kind of stupid now that I'm writing it out, but they're only half siblings. Me and my half brother pretty much look the same and have very similar personalities despite having different dads. It's even funnier because I'm a female, so does he look like a girl or do I look like a boil mayo? Not my story, but someone very close to me discovered that none of the ethnic background that they were expecting was present in the results. This person, whose father was deceased at the time, questioned their mother. The mother admitted that the person's father was not biological as they believed their entire life. They were older than 40. The mother gave the name of the biological father. My friend then found the biological father, contacted him, and then discovered that they had several 1/2 siblings. The biological father was unaware he had another child and accepted my friend into his family as did the siblings. My wife is adopted, but found her bio mom and did one of the genetic tests. Someone matched with her and asked if she knew such and such a name. She found out her bio mom's husband wasn't the bio dad, it was the bio mom's boss. Oops. NGL, I'm adopted and I'm the daughter of an affair someone named married man had with a waitress in her early 20s. I have no desire to take these DNA tests. Your wife is brave. I was adopted and always knew I was adopted. My parents told me that I came from a family that had already had all of their kids. They live several towns over. I was a surprise. 3 years ago my wife decided to take some DNA tests. I figured what the heck, maybe I'm part Zulu warrior. That'd be cool. When the tests came back, I found out I had a first cousin. They had listed a public email. I emailed them, started comparing notes, and wham, I was in for quite a surprise. First, I was not born into a traditional family. Instead, my bio mom was single. Second, I was not the late addition. I had 4 sisters and 1 brother. I was a baby, but only by a couple of years. Third, most all of them lived nearby. Finally, nobody knew I was alive. My biological mom had passed. She had kept the pregnancy secret from everybody else. Before she died, she had confided in one of my bio sisters that she had a baby a long time ago, and she had put the baby up for adoption. She told nobody else. When my sister told the rest of the family, they didn't believe her. So when I finally looked them up, she was like, see, all those years, I told you so. We have a baby brother. It was an amazing experience. I had no idea what I was getting into when I sent that DNA test off. The way this was going, I totally thought you were gonna say your wife was your first cousin. My aunt discovered that her mother cheated on her father and she was a product of that affair, meaning she was actually only half siblings with her 4 siblings. The rub was that my aunt's husband was married before he married her. The woman he was married to is the daughter of the man involved in the affair, so no one knew this. But my uncle got divorced and then married his ex-wife's half-sister. I guess he has a type. A woman over in Chicago decided to find out who her real parents were. She was getting close to 60 and realized that there may not be much time left to find her father. So through the magic of Ancestry she was matched to my grandfather. She reached out to him and told him who her mother was. He didn't recognize the name but dug up his little black book and lo and behold, there she was. So now I've got a new aunt. I am the family secret. Family discovered their brother cousin's son and his wife had 3 children and gave them all up for adoption. After matching with me through a DNA test, they were shocked to say the least, but we're all pretty close now. My male cousin did one and found a female cousin we did not know about. He reached out to her and apparently our deceased uncle was good friends with her mother. Mom wanted a baby so uncle got her pregnant simply as a sperm donor. Female cousin lived a few blocks away from my grandmother. She had met her a few times going around selling Girl Scout cookies or something. My grandmother had no idea that she was buying cookies from her granddaughter. On the flip side, my dad used to say my mom slept around and none of the three of us were his kids. Well, thanks to the test, we know all three of us are. My aunt's ex-husband is like that. He thinks none of his kids are his because they're too brown. He is brown as frick BTW. Found out I have a different father. My dad also took a DNA test at the same time and found out his father, of 52 years, was not his biological father either. As it turns out, I come from a line of bastards. Just watch out if your wife ever gets pregnant. I found a half-sister that none of my siblings or mother knew about. My dad had an affair 50 years ago. He's dead now. For us it wasn't really a surprise. We already have a half-sister from another affair, but for the newly discovered one it answered a lot of questions and gave her some needed closure. We all met a few times. It was pleasant. Not me, but a friend never knew who his father was. Mom had a weekend fling in college and never contacted the guy after, and his wife helped him use Ancestry.com to try and track him down. My friend reached out and the guy was obviously surprised, but flew across the country to meet him. They have a great relationship now. The dad attended his wedding, and they try to get their families together a couple times a year or so. That's awesome. I was hoping DNA testing would help find my husband's dad, but no such luck. Never found anyone on his possible dad's side closer than about a third cousin, so no luck even finding anyone who knows who he might be. A friend discovered that her father was not really her father. Her mom had an affair and she was the result. It tore her family apart. Her father did not know he was not really her father. Note, she was 45 years old when this happened. Not me, but a family friend. He did the test and found out he had a half-brother. Turns out his dad had an affair a while back, and that kid was a product of that affair. A full 100% older brother. My mother got pregnant by my father before they were married. Scandalous in 1960. So, with my father's knowledge of the situation, Mom left town and lived with my aunt until the birth. Mom gave the baby up for adoption and then returned home. A couple years later, she married my dad and had 3 more children together, including me. 55 years later, after both my parents had died, my aunt let it slip that me and my siblings that were not the only children of our parents. To paraphrase from Star Wars, there is another. My sister took a DNA test, and a couple of years later she got a hit. Soon thereafter, we met our new big brother and his family, wife, kids, and have become quite close. This is the exact same story as my mother. She was the one given away and met her 3 sisters for the first time when she was about 50. My dad has a cousin living in Utah. The family has always lived in Pennsylvania. For the timing to work, his grandfather hooked up prior to coming to the US in 1918, or his grandmother had a kid and gave it up when she was like 14. Either way, the kid would have been my dad's aunt uncle, which we never knew about. My cousin took a test and goes on and on about how she's almost completely Irish. Our grandpa was German. I'd heard from my mom as a kid that my aunt's biological father was probably her friend's father. I've looked the family up on Facebook and my aunt looks just that friend. My cousin seems to have no idea of any of this. I don't think my aunt does either. Similar in my family, German grandpa has a child and grandchildren with no German blood. He's passed a few years ago, but the evidence is there. My ex-husband's family were proud of their Dutch heritage and claimed to be one of the founding families of the historically Dutch Holland. His ancestry results didn't show any Dutch ancestry. Instead, he had primarily English-Irish ancestry. Oh gosh, I grew up in West Michigan. The amount of people who say if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much without having an ounce of Dutch in them is hilarious. My dad and aunt found out they had an older brother. Long story, my grandfather had a fling before he met my grandmother, never even knew he had a son. Went and lived his life, and some near 60 years later, boom. Ancestry test, here you go. So another really good story from this one. I've been flinging most of my life. Now I'm thinking I should get the DNA thing done. So, I did the health DNA one 18 months ago because I wanted to see if I had the breast cancer gene, as there is several incidences on both sides of my family. Got my results and became very confused. It claimed I had no Italian despite my father's grandma literally coming over from Sicily in 1920. It took me a few minutes to realize what that actually meant. My parents have been together since my mother was 14. I was born when she was 17, and my father joined the military and married my mother. Called my mom and she literally said that's interesting. Then she asked me not to talk to my father and she would explain everything the next time I visited. She did not, and just refused I talk about it. Honestly, I was just shook. I did not see it coming and it was never even presented to be a possibility to me. My sister ended up doing a DNA test and it showed that we were half siblings. I went no contact with my mother 4 months ago due to this incident and several others. I haven't told my dad, but I realize at some point the truth is going to come out. My sister matched with some of my father's relatives while I did not, so if anyone checks that crap, they are gonna be asking questions. She did not, and just refused I talk about it. She's not really in a position to play that card. D. Always thought my grandfather on my father's side was adopted and thought our last name was just of the family that adopted him. One DNA test later and the family figures out that my great grandparents got pregnant out of marriage and ran away. They came back with a child saying it was adopted so they wouldn't be shamed for him. That's how we figured out that my last name is for sure from blood. That's adorable. They all lived happily ever after. That my grandmother was biracial. She was abandoned shortly after birth at a church by an older white lady, adopted by a white farmer with 11 kids, stopped talking to most of that family due to nondescript unpleasantness as an older teen. She died 20 years before I was born and looks like Maya Rudolph in the few photos I've seen, but insisted she was part Sicilian. My father and his brother both look more white than not. My father worshipped the ground she walked on and never questioned her ancestry. My uncle was always pretty sure she was black and argued with her a lot. Both dad and uncle ended up being super active in the civil rights movement and still are devoted to anti-racism work nearly 60 years on, which largely stemmed from these discussions growing up. Anyway, my mom, divorced from my dad, got me a DNA test a few years ago. My grandmother was definitely half black. I have no Sicilian or Italian DNA. I've connected with a few black distant cousins over email and Zoom. I'm waiting for the pandemic to mostly end to talk to my dad about it and introduce him to more family. I bet Italian got used a lot as an explanation for darker skin. I exported my raw DNA from 23andMe and threw it through Prometheus to find out why I have porphyria, which is supposed to be hereditary. My mom and dad are definitely my mom and dad, but neither of them have this, which means it was environmental exposure that caused it. Discovered a rare AMPD enzyme deficiency in mom. Found out dad carried a recessive lupus gene and gave it to my sister. DNA is wild. My mom's DNA test came back with interesting results. So my grandparents' families both immigrated from Poland during World War II. We don't know much about our families' lives in Poland other than a significant number of them died, and there are Roma roots on my grandpa's side. They settled in Philadelphia in a poor, mostly Polish neighborhood. Grandma and grandpa had a rough marriage, but due to religion and appearances never divorced. No one in the family remembers grandma being pregnant, nor are there any pictures of her pregnancy or of my mom as a newborn. Additionally, mom looks like no one in the family. She's got olive skin and dark, thick, curly hair, whereas everyone else is light-skinned with straight, light medium hair. She also has blue eyes, whereas both grandparents had brown. My mom, my sister, and I have theorized that either one, grandma adopted her because she wanted a kid but didn't want to have sex with her husband too. Grandpa knocked up someone else and grandma took the baby. But we lean towards the latter because there have been some physical traits and medical conditions that my mom and us kids seemingly inherited from grandpa. So a few years ago, mom decides to one of those DNA ancestry tests. Her main reason was to explore the Roma roots, thinking that her results would come back mostly Polish Eastern European. We joked about the stolen baby thing but didn't think it would show anything to support that. Even if it was true, her results came back and they were very Baltic and Middle Eastern. No Polish whatsoever. We were shocked. Mom chalked it up to the test not being super reliable. We haven't seriously discussed the results and the implications they might present. Mom has said she'd rather never know if she's biologically her mother's daughter. They don't have a great relationship, so I think it would create more turmoil either way. Personally, I'm convinced the truth is that grandpa got someone else in the neighborhood pregnant and grandma took the baby both to hide the scandal and so she could have a kid. I definitely think there could have been other families with similar backgrounds to my grandfather's, especially during the time of World War II where many refugees were escaping to the US and lying about their background out of fear. TLDR. Mom, daughter of Polish immigrants, took DNA test to explore Roma roots. Results came back heavily Baltic Middle Eastern and support family theory that mom was a stolen baby. I knew about being conceived using art, but I didn't know about the Duggarish number of half-siblings I had from the same sperm donor. Frankly, it blindsided my parents too. Not me, but a friend. My friend, 34F, decided to get her twin sister and parents a DNA testing kit for Christmas. When her parents opened the gift, they looked at each other and said, "Oh, thanks." They quickly tried to move on to other presents. My friend was slightly confused, but dropped it. Later they went for their Christmas Day walk. The mom and sister were walking ahead while she walked with her dad. Her dad spilled the beans. Her and her sister were adopted. The mother looked back and started crying. She couldn't believe her husband told her daughter without them talking about it first. They were going to keep it a secret forever. She had never suspected she or her sister were adopted because they look a lot like their parents. They are also very short, as are their parents. Whoops. I took a DNA test and found I am ethnically 25% Ashkenazi. After 8 months of serious digging, I found out my grandpa, my father's dad, is not my father's biological father. I have since came into contact with my half-uncle. He's super nice and I enjoy chatting with him. I love learning about my bio grandpa and the rest of the family. We haven't told them and don't plan on it. I have a small family, so it was such a great comfort to connect with more family, understand my lineage and the history of my Jewish ancestors. Really a lovely experience. My grandmother is the world's sweetest person and had a horrible woman as a mother. Her father, though, was incredible. She always talks about how I remind her of him, the small and sweet things they did together, and how much she misses him. Recently, she told me that her mother would tell her he isn't your real father. You know, whenever she felt like hurting my grandmother some more. This continued until the day she died, and her father escaped her mother's abuse and never spoke to my grandmother again. My nana doesn't blame him at all and still loves him very much to this day. She decided to go on Ancestry because she said that she needs to know before she dies, although she said it wouldn't change anything about how she felt about him. Turns out, her mother was right. My grandmother found her biological family and loves to talk about her French heritage that she's now learning about. To this day, she doesn't hold anything against her non-biological dad. He took care of my grandmother when her mother wouldn't, knowing it wasn't his child. He loved her, soothed her, and nurtured her through as if she was his own, and he made sure thought she was. He saved my grandmother's spirit, I'll tell you that much. He helped shape her into the most miraculous human being I've ever met. To this day I'll always refer to him as my great-grandfather, and if I have a son I'll be naming him after him. This story always gets me teary-eyed. But the thought of Alistair, my nana's pretend dad, always makes me really happy. I know it makes her happy, too. My Phil found out he's the milkman's son, so to speak, and everyone else including his sister knew. It explained why they treat his wife and kids like black sheep. That's a horrible thing to find out, and horrible for his family to treat him like that, let alone not even telling him. Hope he and the rest of your family is doing better now. My great-gran, who I knew, was an orphan live-in servant in Greenock, Scotland in 1900. Got pregnant by her employer, kicked out, ended up in the poorhouse where she abandoned the baby. The DNA turned up the granddaughter of the baby. Met her in Glasgow a couple of years ago. She turned up as a cousin via DNA. Found out that my brother is only my half-brother. Our parents, well, who we thought were both our parents, were never married. but my mom has insisted my whole life that my dad is my brother's dad. He never acknowledged my brother, he did me, claiming that the man my mom was living with at the time was probably his father. My mom has always said the other fellow was simply her roommate. Given that my dad was an alcoholic and chronic liar and our mom has never been someone to lie to make herself look better, and that my brother looked pretty much exactly like my dad in an old army photo, we believed our mom. So my brother gets an Ancestry DNA test done and he's got no German ancestry at all, even though our dad's side of the family is super German. But, hey, things happen. DNA comes out weird. Then I got a test done, and he showed up as a close match, but with 99% certainty a half-sibling. So we dig into this a little more, and my half-sister from my dad's side's son shows up on mine but not his. She's there too now, only on mine. All the cousins on my dad's side showed up on mine but not his. The relatives we have in common are our mom's family, so we're left with the certainty that our mom has been wrong all these years. Again, I swear to you that this woman does not lie to make herself look better. It just doesn't occur to her. I mean, I was in elementary school when she told me I was the result of a drunken attempt to get her ex-boyfriend to leave his wife for her. This woman is really a lot more honest than she should be, by all rights. So we've actually decided not to raise the issue with her. Either she's gone 50 years not knowing the actual father of her oldest child, or there's enough trauma there to make an unusually honest woman lie. This is just one more small bit of weirdness in our family anyway. My brother's legally my uncle. This one is a dowsy. Some guy in Texas took a DNA test. My grandma took a DNA test a year earlier, in Utah. Found out they were siblings. Same father. They have met and are literally best friends. Talk on the phone daily and send each other care packages in the mail. It's nuts. My sister did 1 through 23 and maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, and discovered we had a cousin. His profile was public because he had been adopted and was hoping to reconnect with his birth family. We were able to figure out that he would have belonged to my dad's sister. My sister wasn't sure how to bring it up with her, so she asked my dad if he could talk to his sister about it. But he dragged his feet a bunch, so my sister eventually had to let her know. It turns out she got pregnant in college back in the 60s and the father bailed. So she went to stay with a friend across the country, had the baby, and put him up for adoption. She ended up telling her parents years later, and they were like, "Oh, okay, thanks for telling us," and never brought it up again because they are extremely repressed. She had also told her husband prior to their marriage, and when their kids were teenagers they had been filled in as well. So it wasn't a huge family secret, it was just one the extended family didn't really know about. Anyway, my sister put our new cousin and our aunt in touch. He had done the DNA test hoping to learn more about his medical history, but also because he wanted to let his birth parents know that they made a great decision and he had an amazing adoptive family and had had a really happy life and had no bad feelings towards them. That was a huge relief for my aunt, because she had always worried about that. The two of them have built a great relationship now and see each other often. I haven't met him in person yet, but several of my family members have, including my dad. My aunt and dad and grandma have all become close to his adoptive parents too, as well as our cousin's wife and kids. His birthday was actually day before yesterday. I'm Facebook friends with him and saw it there. My wife no longer knows who her father is. We are about to approach her mom about this, but that's a delicate relationship balance to approach due to her mom being very straight-laced and proper. It's shook my wife 45F entire foundation. She was from 6 generations of Texans. Now she is lost. I don't know how to help her. She is not real interested in finding out who her real father is yet. She is also relieved because the man she thought was her father is a weird butthole. I wish her dad, her mom's current husband of 40 years, was her real dad, though he did legally adopt her years ago when the guy she thought was her dad abandoned her. It's mess. Hard pass on the DNA tests for me. I'm good being just 90% fricked up. Realize that there might be something really dark going on. It is possible her mom had an affair. It is also possible your wife was the product of rape. I would be mindful of that when approaching her. My deeply racist backwoods Mississippi family had an African in it 6 generations ago. My grandma is about 5% African. I found out I'm a little Jewish. which prompted my cousin to dig deeper, and we found out we were expelled into Italy during the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. A long-lost relative contacted me. He is the same age as my dad and looked straight up related. He was adopted and wanted to connect with his birth family. Long story short, I found out that my grandfather had an affair with my great aunt and they put the baby up for adoption. My great aunt went away while she was pregnant and came back with no baby. It was the 60s. The family was freaking out about it, trying to keep it all hush hush. I felt bad for the guy, so I did my best to help him out. So technically, he is my uncle cousin. And we live in Kentucky, which makes it even funnier. My sister is almost half Hispanic, no traces of my father's DNA, and I'm 1% Ashkenazi Jewish. None of these fit with the DNA tests they took the previous year. So I live in a very small town, and when I was about 9 or so I went to my friend's birthday party. This girl hung out with another group of girls, so I didn't know everyone there too well. I'm not sure how we got on the topic, but one of the girls told me her dad's name was Steve and she wasn't allowed to talk to him. And I was like, huh, that's weird. I have a cousin named Steve and you kind of look like his son a bit. I asked my mom to send a picture of Steve and the girl said it was her dad. Obviously I didn't understand very well, but I told my mom that Steve was my new friend's dad. She told me not to say anything about it. Well, Steve had been married for many years at this point and had 2 sons only a few years younger than me. So for Steve to be my friend's dad, that meant that he would have had to have cheated on his wife. I didn't think about this for many years and we all sort of blew it off. I never really hung out with this new friend again and she grew up to have a very difficult life. I know her family struggled financially and her mom was out partying, it seemed. The poor girl was even found in a P video that ended up circling in the town. Meanwhile, Steve is living in a very nice large house. His kids have everything they need and he is living the life. So I do 23andMe and the friend is a suggested match as my cousin. I sent her a connection request and I'm waiting for her to accept it. I'm not really sure if I should mention it to Steve or what. I told my parents only. I just feel so horrible that had Steve stepped up and fathered this girl as he did his other children, her life could have been drastically different. Or at the very least paid her mother child support. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.